What's up?
Hello there, everybody. How you doing? You having a good week? I hope you're having a good week. Today, I'm going to break away from the SnowFlake 33 Fame series thing I've been doing for the past few episodes, and I'm going to return back to earlier idea that I had. I'm going to give you the description of the Astra Volume 1 CD. I will continue the Fame discussion, but that'll be in the next episode. I figured it's been a while since I've done an album description, so it's time to do another one, and today will be Ad Astra 1. Now, what's funny about it is I had finished the description for Ad Astra 1 probably about 7 months ago, and I had it in the can, and I was just kind of waiting for the right time to release it. But what happened in the time between then and now is, in the other SnowFlake episodes that came in between, I explained away a lot of the things that I was talking about in that description, and it kind of became like obsolete, and I had to, redo it. And as I discuss the album, you'll see what I mean, because a lot of this stuff was covered already. And it's nice because it kind of can abbreviate the description a little bit, because I can reference previous SnowFlake episodes to get more details about what I'm talking about, which is nice. I didn't plan it that way. It just kind of worked out that way. And so remember, I will continue with the Fame discussion in the next episode. Yeah, and it should be done around this time next week. So here we go with the PC3 Ad Astra Volume 1 description. And like before, I'm holding the CD in my hand, and the first thing I see, of course, is the Sparkler Boy, as we call him in my household, with the dog, the little boy holding a sparkler with the dog. And, Ad Astra Volume 1 was obviously the first release from PC3, and the reason I chose that artwork for the cover was because of the story I told you back in the Clouds episode when I was telling you that I worked in a print shop, okay? Well, this clip art came from that print shop, and that print shop, when I look back on it now, was probably the best job I've ever had. It was definitely the best boss that I ever had. It was just a good situation. I worked with my best friend. My boss was really great, and it was a print shop. So, I was a bit of a graphic artist already in high school and things like that. And it was really a great place for me to cut my teeth with that kind of stuff. And that's where I would make all the flyers for this band that I was in, Thumper Incorporated. And then the flyers actually became part of this band. Like, people would collect the flyers that I made. They were art. They weren't just advertisements. And the reason I chose it for the cover of the first PC3 release is because it was the image I chose for the first pipe choir release that I ever did, which I can reference you back to, I think it's the first Fame episode or the second one, where I'm talking about how I was in the studio with my band and I wound up making a song and it went onto the radio and all that stuff. Well, I'm in this print shop and I need some kind of cover art. I need to make a cassette tape of the song to promote it, because all of a sudden I need to do that. So I went through the clip art that we had in the print shop and I found this image of this little sparkler boy. And that was the image that I used for the very first sound recording that I did under the name Pipe Choir. The very first image was this Sparkler Boy clip art. And I liked it. I mean, it works even now. It was good then and it's good now. Kind of a cool idea. The little Peter Pan collar and that weird kind of, like, I don't even know, creepy, like, silhouette art kind of thing of this little boy holding a sparkler while this dog is, like, bouncing around his heels trying to get the sparkler. you know, excited. And it just worked. And so when it came time to make Ad Astra 1, which was going to be the debut CD from PC3, this new wing of pipe choir that I'd created, I thought it would be appropriate to go right ahead and grab that old image from the very first thing I did and apply it to the very first CD of PC3. And so that's what I did. And it was kind of like a no-brainer. Didn't have to think about it too much. And I guess I can say the title Ad Astra means to the stars. You know, it came from a textbook in history class that I had in high school. And for some reason, I don't even know why or how, but I wound up with that book. It's in my book collection. And periodically I would grab it and look at it because the images in it are so cool and so weird. You know, especially for a history book, it's a very weird book. And in the very end of the book, they're talking about the moon landing. And the title of that chapter was Ad Astra. And I always thought that was cool because it's Latin and it means to the stars, which is kind of where I'm coming from or where I'm going. And it works. So there you go. That's what Ad Astra means. Volume 1 was because I knew there was so much material I had that I would have enough for at least 3 different CDs. And PC3 Ad Astra Volume 1 was the first time that I ever released a CD. Ever. Of my own material. So it was kind of a big deal for me. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I like to hold a CD, or I like to hold something in my hand, and I like to look at artwork when I purchase music myself. So even though my music is available, you know, on the internet for download and streaming and all those things, I'm still the kind of person who places value on a CD and holding something in your hand and, you know, having a tangible thing. I'm a tactile individual. So when the opportunity came for me to start making CDs, it was kind of a big deal for me. I was excited about it because it was something that I'd always wanted to do. I just didn't really have the means to do it. And you know, when the time came to put this together, it was really a lot of fun, and it was like pretty exciting for me. So it was my first time. And so the format that I chose, you know, for this cover art, you know, I knew it would be the choice I was making for at least 3 CDs. You know, the format of having the name like it is and the artwork like it is and a shape and all that. I knew I was going to do that. So this kicked it off. And so when I open up the CD and I open up the booklet, there's a picture on the inside of the CD booklet. And it's a still shot of that fire footage that I was using for my videos on YouTube. You can still find those videos on YouTube of the fire footage that I shot. And I guess here's a bit of information I can share with you that I did not share with you before about that fire footage. The fire footage that I used for my videos was not just some arbitrary footage that I made and, you know, just slapped it up there and made videos out of it. What that fire actually was, I took a bunch of stuff from my past that was symbolic of my past or that I just didn't want anymore. I didn't need it anymore. And I threw it all into a barrel in my backyard and I lit it all on fire and I burned it. And it was a pretty big fire in this barrel. And being the kind of person who never wastes anything, I figured, okay, while it's burning, I'll film it. And maybe somewhere down the line I can use the footage. So I filmed the fire of all this, of my past burning, and I put it into some software and I played around with it, and I wound up getting something that I thought was really, really cool, which was this fire footage that's all crazy, like a kaleidoscope almost, and like trippy. And it just looked so great that I started to use it as just like a default video for all of my music. Like just this inferno, you know? It just, to me, looked so cool, and it went with all the music so well. So when I made this CD, I decided I'm going to take a still frame of that footage, because it's a still frame of this funeral pyre from my past. And that's what it is. When you watch that fire footage, you're watching my past burning. You're watching me cut it off and leave it behind. And I thought that was cool for this first CD. Like I'm moving into the future. True story. That's a true story. So, of course, you have the first song, which is called Ad Astra. And Ad Astra was very deliberately written to be the intro to an album. It just wasn't written to be the intro to this album. It was written to be the intro to a pipe choir album, which is the music that I make that is a little more contemporary and a little more conventional in song length and duration, and they're very conventional arrangements. But I had scrapped the pipe choir album that I was working on, that song Ad Astra was written for, and I put it on this CD as the opener, because I thought that the title was so cool, and I was calling the series, I was naming the series of CDs after that. It was going to be Ad Astra, back to that book I told you about. And so now you can kind of sense this theme here, actually, of there's this thing going on with my past and leaving it behind and moving forward. I have the footage from my past showing you literally my past burning in a barrel. I have this title, Ad Astra, from my high school days, a high school textbook. I have the Sparkler Boy on the front that was from the original CD of Pipe Choir, or the original cassette tape of Pipe Choir, the very first artwork I used from that print shop that I used to work at. And so there you go. There's a theme here, right? So then there's track number 2. And track number 2 is a song called Try. I'm going to tell you about Try. Try is a very interesting song. One, because it has a 3-letter title, which I love. And the reason that I called it Try was because it was my first try at breaking out of the conventional standard song length, the song duration. So I was consciously stepping out of the 3 to 5 minute song length and experimenting and going past that. And I had no reason to do that other than I just felt like being a scientist and just having some fun, just to see if I could do it. And one of the first things I remember is where my studio was, it had a window, and the window went out into an alley. And the acoustics in this alley were, I guess, pretty good, because when you hear the thunder and lightning at the beginning of Try, it goes throughout the entire piece of music. I just stuck the microphone out the window and pressed play and record, and I let it go for 18 minutes and 34 seconds, And I let the recording of that rainstorm and the thunder and lightning determine the length of the song. So I had the rain and the thunder and the lightning as the background. It was the background for this music. Then I went about, laying tracks down. I put some drums down that felt good. This kind of quiet groove beat with the brushes. Very, very reminiscent of The Verve, a band that I love very much. Very underrated band, in my opinion. Profound influence on me. in so many ways, and especially the drummer, because he used brushes. And I like bands that use brushes. It's a very cool approach to that instrument. And I was a metal drummer, and I'm not a weakling. I mean, I can lay it down. And AC/DC drums, crack and thud. That's what I call them. Crack and thud drums. John Bonham, like rock out, hit them as hard as you can, kill them. And when you take that kind of technique and you put brushes in my hand, it changes everything. So I experimented a lot with brushes, and I liked bands that used brushes, like the Charlatans UK. I liked how their drummer was using brushes, and I liked how the Verve used brushes on the drums. So that's what you got in the song called Try. First I laid down the Rainstorm, then I laid down the drums, and then I just started to add tracks, and I did a scat vocal that made no sense. It doesn't actually, if you really try to listen to what I'm saying, it doesn't make any sense. I'm just making noises with my mouth, and I wound up keeping them in. I didn't go back and really change anything. I might have moved things around or arranged them a little bit, but I didn't re-sing it and give it lyrics. I just pressed play and record, and I started singing into the microphone to what I was hearing. I guess I kind of didn't take into consideration that people might actually like it and want to know what I'm singing about or what I'm saying. So I kind of took the U2 Unforgettable Fire approach on that one. I kind of just sang with my soul, and I never went back and fixed it. I just left it. And it wound up, working out pretty good. And I can honestly say, too, there's a group from the 60s or the 70s called Moods Orchestra. And they made an album called Stormy Weekend. And it became like, it was like contemporary orchestra music with storm sound effects behind the music, which I imagine at that time was like really breaking out, really breaking away from the mainstream and going off into some weird thing. And it wound up becoming an idea that this orchestra, this Moods Orchestra, repeated. They had, Stormy Weekend, Stormy Evening, each album was, with these sound effects of rain. It was just music with the sound effects of rain. That's really all it was. But apparently it did well, and it was enough to influence the Verve, and that's how I heard about them. So I checked them out, and they were okay, it was all right. I get it, it wasn't something I necessarily liked, but I could appreciate it. It was all right. But, this idea of me using the Rainstorm and these brush drums, these light-handed drums, that's the Verve, okay? That's the Verve. The technique is theirs, not mine. And I was more than happy to give it a try. But I can say this too about Try. The guitar line for Try. I was really trying to sound like Muzak. I was trying to sound like Muzak. That's what I was going for, and I think I achieved it too. I do. When I listen to it, it sounds like that really, flaccid guitar tone that you get when you're at like J.C. Penney, shopping for, shoes. That's the music in the background, And so I was pretty happy that I did that. It was fun to do. It was fun to try to be cheesy. And there was a humor in it that no one else would ever get, but I got it. So when I hear it, I kind of laugh a little bit, because that's my sense of humor. Let's see, what else would I say about Try? Oh, like I started this pattern. I go from piano to guitar to vocals. So it starts with piano, then it goes into a guitar, and then it goes into a vocal, and then it goes back to the piano, and then it goes back to the guitar, the vocal, etc., etc. And I had to do that throughout the duration of the song. And then I decided that was a little bit too long to repeat the same thing over and over again. But then the song was 18 minutes, and I don't remember exactly, but there's a section where the music all of a sudden changes and everything changes. And what I did was I literally went into that session from like, if I remember correctly, I think it was probably 10 minutes to 14 minutes, and I erased everything that was there, and I built this whole section in the middle of in the middle of this song, and I married it as closely as I could to the rest of the song and made this whole separate section. So the song changed, and then it went back to what it was doing. And that was the first time I ever did that. It took a lot of guts for me to wipe that whole section out and have it be silence. Like, once I hit the button, it's gone. I have to commit, and I have to do this, and then go back and rebuild a whole new section. I thought that was pretty cool, and it was a good exercise for me because it's something that I've done since then, and I've gotten pretty good at it. It was important to learn it. Okay, and it was important to learn also to not be afraid to do that kind of stuff, not be afraid to experiment. Even if you're happy with what you got, don't be so precious about it. Sometimes it's good to mess it up a little and make it harder to do. Just saying. So that was Try. I released that song online, and let me tell you something. It went crazy for me online, and I couldn't really figure out why. It still does. It still does extremely well, that song. People use it in all kinds of videos and commercials and things like, all kinds of stuff, movies, and it just did really well. And that was kind of the green light for me. I mean, that was all I needed to see was, I had released all this other music, and it did okay. And then I released this one really long song, and for some reason, it just blew everything else I did out of the water, number-wise. So that was all I needed to see. And that's what set into motion that whole idea of making the 20-minute songs and the formation of what I call honest wave music, which is the music that I make. That's what I do. Okay, so the next song is Ancient Whispers. And Ancient Whispers is an interesting track. I wrote it a long time ago. I wrote it back in, let's say, probably 2004. And I did this version of it, this original version of it, which I'll play for you right now. Okay, and that was Ancient Whispers. That was the first version of the song that I had done. And I didn't think that it was bad. It just was when I had first really started to learn the rudiments of recording digitally. And I decided that it was probably a good idea for me to revisit it and to go at it again, but with a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more skill. So I did that. I just sat down one day and said, now I will do Ancient Whispers. I'll redo it. And I got all of the music down. Everything was pretty much the same as the original, just a better production of what it was. And right around that same time, my wife and I frequent thrift stores. Like I explained in the episode of the book business about my wife and I, SnowFlake 33 episode, the book business. My wife and I like to go to thrift stores. I mean, we just do. We love to shop at thrift stores. And I'm always, like, whenever I go to a thrift store, I'm always looking for musical gear. And I have found some treasures under those circumstances. Let me tell you. been shocked at what I was able to get for $30 at a thrift store. That's a separate story. Anyway, what had happened was I went to this thrift store with my wife, and I found this little guitar. It's a little piece of junk first act guitar for little kids. It's like a ukulele. I mean, it looks like a ukulele. And, technically a piece of garbage, a toy. But I picked this thing up, and I don't know what happened. It was just kind of like I just could not put it down. Even though it's a toy, for some reason, I think I was kind of pissing people off at the thrift store because I was walking around playing it. I just couldn't stop playing this thing. I loved it. It just felt great in my hands. It felt good on my shoulder. It just was like I could just play this thing all day, And and I'm walking around with this guitar in my hand, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know what? I could use this thing. I could use it on Ancient Whispers. I could do that because I can detune it, and it sounds so weird and so like clunky to me. Anyway, it sounded like so clunky and kind of ethnic and kind of just had that sound. To me, it had that kind of shimmer. And so what I did was, I took it home for $5, and I started to play around with the tuning on it, trying to match it to the song and get in there with it, make sure it's in key, it's in tune with the song. But it's just like I said, a cheap little guitar. Okay, you hear that? Okay, and then but you just add a little bit of flanger to it, a little bit of reverb to it, and it sounds like this. A really simple kind of thing. Just fell in love with it, and it sounded so good on Ancient Whispers, I wound up using it a lot. $5, Salvation Army. Awesome. And also, too, I can say that at the time I was redoing Ancient Whispers, there was a band that I had found. They're called Alcyon. They're from Montreal. And, they had this album, and it was just so awesome, And on this album, they had a song called Assemblage Point. Is the name of the song, and it's a instrumental. It's a short little instrumental in this really artsy, weird kind of album, really atmospheric and just really good music. You should check it out. But on this song Assemblage Point, it was just this instrumental with this lute, like electronic music almost, this dark kind of soundscape with this lute guitar playing over it. And that was the inspiration for me. Hey, grabbing this little first act guitar I had and trying to mimic that lute sound that they had on that album. I thought it was so cool, and I was like, I'm going to try something like that. That's what it is. I'm very, very happy with that one. Very happy with how that came out. And that's where I'll leave it for that. It was an experiment that just went very well. Okay, then there's Cavalcades, track number 4. Okay, Cavalcades, that's good too. It's a simple one to talk about because I remember it very clearly. At the time, I had just purchased a CD version of this album called Gone to Earth by David Sylvian and Brian Eno. Originally given to me by the guitar player from Slow Bob. He was the guy who handed me a lot of that Brian Eno stuff and a lot of that David Sylvian stuff and Harold Budd, and he really kind of changed me quite a bit just by doing things like that. And I had this cassette tape for years. I think I had 3 different versions of it on cassette, and I wore it out 3 times. And when I wore out the 3rd copy, I finally broke down and went onto Amazon, and I ordered the CD version of this album. And the music on that album was like medicine to me. Okay, I could talk about it all day long, so I'll make it brief. But there was a time in my life when that music was the only piece that I could find. So that's all I'm going to say. I wore it out 3 times. Okay, listened to it a lot, and it got me through some really, really hard times. And I loved it. So I finally got it on CD, and it was like seeing an old friend again for the first time in years. Like, oh, I forgot how much I love this music and how great it is for me. So I decided when I was going to do a new piece of music that I was going to go for a David Sylvian kind of thing. And not rip it off, but go into it and let the spirit of David Sylvian come into the room and influence this sound that I'm going to make. And that's what Cavalcades is. It was me sitting down and just letting the Gone to Earth CD and David Sylvian and Brian Eno, let them come into my head and come out through my hands. And that's exactly what I did. And I loved that song. I liked it right away. I thought it was just really, really a nice piece of music. It didn't need vocals. It didn't need anything. It was good just as an instrumental. And it's not very long. It's a standard length. It's only 3 minutes and 38 seconds long. But it's enough. And it's good. And the title, Cavalcades, okay? Cavalcades comes from a book, again, from when I was in grade school. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a book called Cavalcades that they taught my English class out of. It was like a book that had poems and short stories and all these things in there. And that's what they taught the class, my English class, from. And somehow I wound up with this book again at my house. And it was just, I loved the name Cavalcades. I mean, I loved the book. I loved the poems in the book and the short stories. And I particularly liked the title. I just thought it was a cool word. And the meaning of it is cool. So when I applied it to this music where you can hear like the ocean waves, and you can hear this kind of like, this longing kind of guitar sound, and just this whole atmosphere, I had this image of waves crashing on the shore, like cavalcades of waves crashing on the shore. And I thought that was just such a cool image, and I would finally get to use that word, and it just fit really well. And that's Cavalcades. Done. Bam. That's it. Okay, so from Cavalcades we go into Sister Wind. And Sister Wind, okay, Sister Wind was originally recorded as like a heavy metal song. And I'll play a little bit of it for you right here. Okay, so that was Sister Wind, and it was horrible, as you can hear. It was not a bad song. It was long before I had any skill at recording guitars, and they were terrible. So what I wound up doing was, I hated the guitars so much and just how bad the recording sounded that I omitted about 1/2 of the tracks that I had recorded. and I kept the other half that I liked. And that's Sister Wind. That's the version that you hear when you press play. Like, there were about 8 tracks of guitars and other instruments and things like that, and I just omitted it from the recording. And that's Sister Wind. That was recorded a little while ago. That was recorded about 2004 as well. So a lot of this material was recorded around the same time. It was. Okay. So, that's Sister Wind. This cool title too, Sister Wind, 2 words mashed into each other, playing with language. Love to do that. Love naming things, like I've said before. Then we go from there to track number 6, which was The Water of Fire or Singing to the Sea. Now, that song is interesting for 2 reasons. One, it has 2 titles, and I'm aware of the fact that Coldplay released a song that had 2 titles, but I did it first. I did not copy Coldplay. Just saying. Not that I would mind copying Coldplay, because they're very good, but I didn't. I named my song with 2 titles first. I thought it was a cool idea that you could choose the title, whichever one you want. I had 2 different titles for the song that I liked, and I had to choose one. And then, in that process, I'm like, why do I need to choose one? Just name it both. Like, that's kind of cool to have like an option. The title of the song is optional. You can choose which one you want. Playing with language, naming things. Okay, so what do I remember about The Water of Fire? Okay, I remember the drums. That's the very first thing that I remember, is that what I did was I mic'd my drum set up really, really simply with just 1 microphone or 2 microphones. And I sat behind the drums and I played. And I just played a couple bars of different beats and different things that I liked. And then I went back after I was done with that, and I just looped that beat. So there was no, for you techies out there was no click track or anything like that. The click track was the drums, the recording of the drums. That's what I used as my click track. And so I just took this beat that I played, this part of this beat that I thought was fresh, and I looped it. And I was like getting really wild and crazy. Like, I'm going to loop it for like 8 minutes. I think that's what it was. Oh no, I'm sorry. 9 minutes. I went really crazy and looped it for 9 minutes, because 9 minutes is just, wow, that's so much, And of course that's laughable now. Yeah. So I looped that beat, and then it was just a matter of just, putting instrumentation down over it. It was not like it wasn't rocket science or anything like that. It was just really a lot of fun, just doing an experiment. And the song doesn't really change for 9 minutes. It stays in the same zone, which was the idea. And that's the idea behind a lot of the PC3 music. It's repetitive on purpose. You know where it's going, and there's no anticipation of a change or anything. It stays in a zone, and the listener can stay in the zone. And I remember doing the vocals for it, and I went back, and made some edits, but really kind of, again, went to the microphone, sang from the soul, didn't go back and make those sounds into actual words. And that's what's in the song. That's it. It was done probably in about 2 or 3 days, just from start to finish, just done. And I could say around that time, which was probably 2004, 2005, 2006, like in that window of time, I did a lot of recording. When I look back on it now, I'm surprised, because there's a lot of work that I did. I was just so excited about being able to record myself and not have to rely on a studio engineer and paying, $100 an hour to get an idea down. I was able to do it at will, and it was so fun, especially when I started to learn a couple things. I mean, it was really a lot of fun. And the Water of Fire came out of that period of time where I was really starting to hit my stride and really starting to know the equipment and how to achieve what I wanted sonically, with microphones and things. I started to kind of get my arms around it a little, and I was having a lot of fun. And the Water of Fire came out of that. And I always loved that song. It was one of the tracks I've made that I knew that if I ever made a CD that it was going to be on it. I just knew it right when I was recording it. I mean, it felt so good, already, while I was recording it, that I knew that if I ever make a CD, this song is going to be on there. And so that's why it's on the first CD I made for PC3. And the title, The Water of Fire, and like what I'm singing about in the song is really kind of hard to explain. But I will elaborate more on it in the future, I think, in SnowFlake 33 episodes, because it's an important turning point, but it comes after Slow Bob. It's at the tail end of Slow Bob, where I had this I had an experience that was metaphysical, okay, for lack of a better term. I won't go into it all right now, but the song is really kind of inspired by that moment. It's kind of like my testimony to what I experienced at this particular moment in this event in my life, that I can't really explain. It's kind of mysterious and everything, I guess, but it really was a turning point for me as a human being. And like I said, I'll elaborate on it later, but the song The Water of Fire, or Singing to the Sea, is about that experience. And if you watch the video for it, what I'm doing in the video, I'm using text in the video to try to tell you what happened. So you might want to check that out. If you like the song The Water of Fire or Singing to the Sea, you might want to check out the video that I made for it, because it'll probably give you an idea, especially now that you've heard me explain a little bit about it, like what I'm actually talking about and what the song is trying to convey. And I'll leave it at that. Okay, so then we go to the last track. The last track of the album is Dune Wander. And again, two words mashed into each other, playing with language, Dune Wander, referencing the beach and the ocean, which I love more than anything. I mean, I come alive when I'm at the ocean. I know that's how it is for a lot of people, but trust me, for me, it's more than that. Okay, it's more than that. I'm definitely an ocean soul. That I am, And so Dune Wander, here's this image right away of this, of walking the beach, with no one around, and just the waves and that solitude and that awesome environment to think and to meditate in. I love it. Love it. I can't afford to live near the ocean, but man, if I could, you'd never see me again. I would disappear. I would be there forever, and I'd never leave. Okay, so Dune Wander. Okay, I can say this too. When I sat down to do Dune Wander, I had already done Try, and I had already done the song 2020 Vision. So I had this clear path about doing these songs that were longer. And Dune Wander was the second one I consciously wrote as a long song. I said, this one's going to be 20 minutes. It's not going to be an experiment. I'm going to write lyrics, and I'm going to make chord changes and different parts and have it be a real song. And it's going to be 20 minutes long. And so I did. And that was Dune Wander. And at the time, I Okay, there's an album by a group called the Masters of Reality. And they have a song called Doraldina's Prophecies off this debut album they released. And it was track for track. It was a fabulous album. The Masters of Reality, self-titled album, produced by Rick Rubin. And it is just killer. Song for song. Start from the beginning, you go all the way to the end. It's just a great album. And very creepy and weird, too. It's like a dark, southern blues rock, borderline metal. It's like a weird dark blues kind of album. Like Zeppelin-ish in some ways, but southern fried rock. Southern fried Zeppelin is probably what I would call it. Very, very interesting. And track number 2 on that album was a song called Doraldina's Prophecies. And it was this creepy, like, blues dirge. And I loved it. And I listened to it quite a bit. I listened to that album quite a bit. I still do. And I was walking around the house kind of singing that song a lot. And it was time for me to come up with a new idea for a song. So I decided after, because I was walking around singing this Masters of Reality song, that I was going to do a blues song. It was something I had never really done before. I'm not a big fan of the blues. I don't dislike it, but I never bought anything that was the blues, I'm not like a fan. But I like this album, and I like this song in particular, and so I used it as a jumping off point. Like, I'm going to try to do a blues song. So you hear me, when you hear Dune Wander, you're hearing me do my debut into the blues vein of music. And what else can I say? Let's see, Dune Wander. One thing that's weird about Dune Wander, I'm not exactly sure why this is the case, but of all the songs that I've released, and I have quite a few now, okay, this song in particular I get requests about this song. People want to know what the words are, and I don't really know why. Like, I get a lot of people asking me if they can have the lyrics for that song. And I don't know why. Of all the songs I have, it's the only one that, well, no, it's not the only one, but it's gotten a lot of inquiries about the lyrics. Not quite sure why. And I don't really like to give out the lyrics to my songs. And as a general practice, I don't. I usually won't give the lyrics out to my songs. But for some reason, that song, people they want to know what I'm singing about. That's what I can mention about it. That's all I can mention about it. It's like, for some reason, it struck people's curiosity. Like, they want to know what I'm talking about. But sorry. Sorry. I prefer to adopt the practice that the singer Seal uses, which is, he doesn't print the lyrics of his songs on his records because he wants the listeners to just hear it the way they hear it. They can get their own meaning from the song. And I don't know. I don't like to spoon feed the meaning to my audience. I like them to kind of have to figure it out or try to get what I'm implying. What else can I say about Dune Wander? Oh, one thing that's cool about it when I hear it is there's a guitar line that goes throughout the song, and it goes from the very beginning to the end. And what I like about that guitar line, it's got like a wah pedal on it. When you hear the song, you'll know what I mean. Well, what's cool about it is when I recorded it, I pressed play and record at the beginning of the song, and I just played all the way through the song. I didn't stop or anything. I just kept going through the whole song, and no particular direction or aim or anything. And the song ended, and I was really happy with what I did. I mean, it sounded okay. I had to go back and knock a couple of bad notes out and edit some bad stuff out because I made a couple of mistakes and stuff. But really, when you hear that song, you're hearing like one take from a 20-minute guitar line, and it wasn't like I had chords or ideas in mind or anything. I just played in the key and came up with this guitar idea, and I thought that was pretty cool. And that's what you hear on the finished track, which I thought was kind of good, and a sign of growth as a guitar player, that I could do that and make something that I was happy with, and now we've made it through the music on the record. I'm putting my booklet back in the jewel case like a good Luddite should, and I'm holding the CD in my hand now, the actual disc, and on the disc I have the star chart, which I explained in the Ad Astra 2 description, I believe. So I won't have to describe that here. This is another one of those things I already covered. And when you take the disc out and you look in the CD tray, it's just a negative image of the star chart again, and that's about it. It was really, Ad Astra 1 was, it was kind of like my first one, but it meant a lot to me to be able to be making a compact disc. It wasn't enough for me to just be making downloadable music and streaming music and things like that. The digital format is great. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I have no problems with it. It's really kind of changed my life, but I'll always make CDs, and I just don't ever foresee a time when I won't be releasing some kind of collection on compact disc or vinyl. My wife and I have talked about doing something on vinyl, but we haven't yet. But we'll see in the future. So that's it. That's my description of PC3's Ad Astra Volume 1. This is Mike Bostwick from Pipe Choir Records signing off. And remember, folks, if you want to keep what you've got to give it away. Take it easy.